All right, welcome to the explainer. I mean, you've seen it everywhere, right? On phone cases, on backpacks, laptops, you name it. It's that little claim that says military grade. It's supposed to mean it's tough, rugged, basically indestructible. But what does that actually mean? So, what's really behind that term? Is it just a clever marketing gimmick? Or is there a real, hardcore standard behind it? We're gonna dive in, because the real story, well, it's way more interesting than just a sticker on a box. Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we have to go straight to the source. And spoiler alert, it's not some marketing team's brainstorm. It's an official document from the US Department of Defense. And here it is, Mil Stand 810H. Yeah, I know, not exactly a catchy name, but this thing right here is basically the source code for anything labeled military grade. And it's huge. We're talking over 1,000 pages. And here's the first huge takeaway. It's not a certification, it's a methodology. It's a rule book for how to simulate the harsh realities of military life for any piece of gear. And if you look at the document's own words, you find the first major clue. See that? The key word there is specific. This isn't about making something that's just, generically tough. It's all about designing something to survive a very particular and often very brutal purpose. And right there, that's the single biggest myth we have to bust. There is no one-size-fits-all military-grade stamp of approval. Milstand 810 is not a simple pass-fail grade. The best way to think about it is like a giant library. A library of pain, basically. It has dozens and dozens of different tests for things like shock, heat, fungus, you name it. A company gets to walk into that library and pick and choose which books, which tests they want to check out. And that whole idea of picking and choosing brings us to the most important concept in the entire standard. It's a philosophy the engineers call tailoring. So check this out. Before a single test is run, before they drop or freeze or shake anything, engineers have to go through this whole process. First, they analyze the mission. Then they build what's called a life cycle profile, which maps out every single stress the gear will face. Then, and only then, do they go into that giant library of tests to pick and customize the ones that perfectly match that life story. And the heart of all this planning is something called the Life Cycle Environmental Profile, or LCEP. I love this. Think of it like you're writing a full-on biography for a gadget. You have to ask, okay, is this thing going to sit in a humid warehouse in Panama for a year? Is it going to be transported in a vibrating, unpressurized cargo plane? Will it be used in the freezing Arctic or the blistering desert? Every single stage is considered. And just look at how detailed this gets. They're not just thinking about when it's being used in the field. Nope. They plan and test for its time just sitting in storage, being bumped around in a truck, or flown to the front lines. Basically, with this method, the journey itself is designed to be just as punishing as the destination. All right, so once that whole plan is locked in, the fun part begins. The equipment has to survive what is basically a gauntlet of abuse, all designed to simulate those worst-case scenarios from its life story. Let's start with heat. And we're not talking left your phone in the car hot. We are talking 71 degrees Celsius. That's 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the kind of heat you get inside a sealed vehicle baking in the desert sun. And the crazy part? The gear doesn't just have to survive. It often has to be fully operational. And then, of course, they swing to the complete opposite extreme. The severe cold test takes things down to a mind-numbing minus 51 Celsius. That's minus 60 Fahrenheit. At that temp, plastics get brittle, things just snap, electronics can just give up. And again, failure is just not an option. Okay, now this is the one you always hear about, right? The drop test on phone cases. But just look at the details here. This isn't one lucky drop onto a carpet. It is a sequence of 26 drops from 4 feet, and they are specifically aimed to hit every single face, every edge, and every corner of the device. It's a systematic beatdown designed to find any weak point. But hey, it's not all about getting dropped and shaken. The gear also has to stand up to chemical attacks. Method 504.3 tests its resistance to things like jet fuel, hydraulic fluid, and, get this,
even common insect repellent. Because the last thing you want is for a leaky bottle of DEET to take out a critical piece of tech.
And this right here is a perfect example of where that tailoring philosophy really shines. The vibration tests aren't just a generic shake test. The standard is smart. It knows the high-frequency buzz of a jet is totally different from the violent, bone-jarring rattle of a helicopter or the bumpy ride in a truck. So the test is always customized to mimic the exact platform that equipment will live on. Okay, so that is the intense, super detailed process for actual military gear. But how does any of this connect back to that military-grade laptop or watch you see for sale online? Yeah, let's just ask the question straight up. When a company slaps a Milstead 810H certified label on their product, what are they really telling you? Because the wording here, it is everything. All right, so here is the big catch, the gotcha moment. First off, the Department of Defense does not, I repeat, does not certify consumer products, ever. A company can test its own product or hire a lab to do it, and they can choose to run just one single test from that entire library, like, say, only the drop test. And then they can legally, and I mean legally, claim it's military-grade compliant. That claim tells you absolutely nothing about whether it can handle heat, cold, humidity, vibration, or any of those other 24 tests. Okay, so let's pull this all together. How should we, as consumers, actually think about this term when we see it? This quote from the standard itself really brings it all home. The entire spirit of this massive document is about one thing: realism. Is the test appropriate? Can you trace it back to a condition that piece of gear will actually face in its life? It's all about being fit for a specific, brutal purpose, not just generically tough. So maybe the best thing we can do is just reframe it in our own minds. Instead of military grade, let's start thinking of it as military method. Because that label isn't promising some vague, magical level of indestructible toughness. What it's really saying is that a specific, rigorous military methodology was used to test it for a very specific purpose. The value isn't in the name. It's in the process. So from now on, when you see that military-grade label, you're going to be way ahead of the game. You won't have to just accept the hype. You can ask the real questions. You can ask, okay, that's cool, but which specific tests from the standard did it actually pass? Was it just the drop test? Or did it survive the heat, the cold, the vibration, the whole gauntlet? Because now you know the method. And knowing the method, well, that's the real meaning of tough.